It is clearly not enough for Donald Trump to destroy our country domestically. He also has to embarrass us all in the process abroad. But of course, it's not just him. He needs a little added help to ruin all our relationships with our allies. And so he has employed the incredibly unqualified and annoying J.D. Vance and his favorite DUI hire in Pete Hegseth, who really made fools of our entire nation in their trip abroad to Munich. But it was specifically J.D. Vance's comments in a speech he gave, really trying to lecture other countries without any ground to stand on, that stood out the most. And it was that speech that Margaret Brennan asked now Secretary of State Marco Rubio about, and his answer was just so absurd, and he got really defensive and angry, and I didn't really feel like he got the point off that he wanted, but we are going to check that all out. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way, and it really does mean a lot to me. Now let's get into this clip, and then I want to talk all about it.
I want to ask you about what happened in Munich, Germany at the security conference. Vice President Vance gave a speech, and he told U.S. allies that the threat he worries about the most is not Russia. It is not China. He called it the threat from within, and he lectured about what he described as censorship, mainly focusing, though, on including more views from the right. He also met with the leader of a far-right party known as the AfD, which, as you know, is under investigation and monitoring by German intelligence because of extremism. What did all of this accomplish other than irritating our allies?
Well, why would our allies or anybody be irritated by free speech and by someone giving their opinion? We are, after all, democracies. The Munich Security Conference is largely a conference of democracies in which one of the things that we cherish and value is the ability to speak freely and provide your opinions. And so I think if anyone's angry about his word, they don't have to agree with him, but to be angry about it, I think actually makes his point. I thought it was actually a pretty historic speech, whether you agree with him or not. I think the valid points he's making to Europe is we are concerned that the true values that we share, the values that bind us together with Europe, are things like free speech and democracy and our shared history in winning 2 world wars and defeating Soviet communism and the like. These are the values that we shared in common. And in that Cold War, we fought against things like censorship and oppression and so forth. And when you see backsliding and you raise that, that's a very valid concern. We can't tell them how to run their countries. He simply expressed in a speech his view of it, which a lot of people, frankly, share. And I thought he said a lot of things in that speech that needed to be said. And honestly, I don't know why anybody would be upset about it. People are allowed, you don't have to agree with someone's speech. I happen to agree with a lot of what he said, but you don't have to agree with someone's speech to at least appreciate the fact they have a right to say it, and that you should listen to it and see whether those criticisms are valid. I assure you, the United States has come under withering criticism on many occasions from many leaders in Europe, and we don't go around throwing temper tantrums about it.
Well, he was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide. And he met with the head of a political party that has far-right views and some historic ties to extreme groups. The context of that was changing the tone of it. And you know that the censorship
I have to disagree with
was specifically about the right.
No, I have to disagree with you. Free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews and they hated minorities and they hated those that they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews. There was no free speech in Nazi Germany. There was none. There was also no opposition in Nazi Germany. They were a sole and only party that governed that country. So that's not an accurate reflection of history. I also think it's wrong. Again, I go back to the point of his speech. Okay, the point of his speech was basically that there is an erosion in free speech and intolerance for opposing points of view within Europe, and that's of concern because that is eroding. That's not an erosion of your military capabilities. That's not an erosion of your economic standing. That's an erosion of the actual values that bind us together in this transatlantic union that everybody talks about. And I think allies and friends and partners that have worked together now for 80 years should be able to speak frankly to one another in open forums.
It's almost funny if it wasn't so sad, and I feel myself saying that a lot. It's kind of like the line I love, hate to use it, never surprised, always disgusted. Like, this is what we expect from these guys. The free speech absolutists that they claim to be censoring and kicking out the AP for not calling a body of water by its new fake name. Like, those are the free speech guys? Kicking people out of the press room, Elon kicking people out of Twitter, Donald Trump trying to shut down the mainstream media with lawsuits, Donald Trump trying to shut down independent media with lawsuits. Doesn't need to shut down the mainstream media. They're already bending the knee. Corporate media, oh, big time they're on board with him. It's ridiculous. It is so hypocritical. Like, it's so hypocritical we need a new word for it. I guess we can just call it MAGA, like, because that's what it is at this point. But the place that Rubio is coming from is just so disingenuous. And it's the reason why I and lots of other creators in this space who think a lot about the messaging aspects of all of this were pretty disappointed that so many Democrats, almost, I think it was every Democrat, voted to confirm Marco Rubio. Sure, he is a senator. You know, of all the Republicans, I think he's spineless. I think he's a joke and a coward. But it's like, oh, of all the Republicans, you know, he's okay. He's not the worst. It's like, what? Okay, so if you don't send a violent mob to the Capitol, then you're like, cool, you're okay. You're like a normal Republican. I feel like that's an unfair standard. Because it's a pretty easy bar to clear. But now he's going along with all this administration is doing. Marco Rubio isn't going to stand up to it. Why would you put any of your credibility as a Democrat into Marco Rubio? And of course, now we see Democrats voting unanimously against all of these cabinet nominees. But I really, not that we need to revisit the past here when there's so much in the future and in the present to talk about, but I just feel like that was a massive failure. And especially with the comments that Rubio is making now, it just seems so sad that, again, we gave him any credibility, any leg to stand on to push this nonsense. Again, going back on the values that they claim to have. And another great example of that, and we've talked so much about it on the show because I want to keep bringing it up because I don't feel like it's getting nearly the attention it deserves, is the clear actual weaponization of our government that's taken place by Donald Trump that Jamie Raskin really did a great job breaking down right here.
Well, the Justice Department is at war with its own attorneys, its own prosecutors, and the whole episode is just saturated with corruption. It was a corruption prosecution and investigation, which led to a grand jury indictment against Eric Adams for bribery, conspiracy, other corruption charges. And then the new Department of Justice decided to squash the whole thing, basically saying to Adams, well, we will drop this case against you if you engage in certain kinds of political or policy accommodations with us. And then in order to complete that deeply corrupt bargain, they had to try to coerce their own lawyers to do it. But of course, the prosecutors were saying nothing has changed in the facts of the case and nothing has changed in the law. In fact, additional evidence was found, meaning that they were going to revise and expand the original indictment, but instead they were told to kill it for political reasons. And so, this is an outrageous violation of the rules of prosecutors and an offense against due process and a very dangerous first move for the Department of Justice to be making under the Trump people.
Mayor Adams, of course, claims there was no quid pro quo and that none of this was wrong. But there was the lead prosecutor as well on this case who resigned in objection to what's happening. But it's moving forward here. This is all now in the hands of a judge. Does he have leeway to prosecute?
So, first of all, just about Danielle Sassoon, I mean, that's a very conservative U.S. attorney, and she couldn't take it. I mean, you have the most conservative prosecutors in the country resigning in opposition to this steamroller on behalf of corruption. But it's not over yet because Judge Dale Ho does not have to accept the withdrawal of the charges, the dismissal of the charges, which 7 Department of Justice attorneys resigned rather than be involved in. The head of the Public Integrity Section, the head of the Criminal Division, 5 other lawyers said no way, and they wrote very stinging rebukes of the Attorney General and the Department of Justice in this case. So Judge Ho has to accept this dismissal, but he may not. He may go ahead and try to appoint another prosecutor to go ahead and, go through with the indictment that was handed down by a grand jury.
Well, Attorney General Bondi says there's nothing wrong here, saying it was President Biden's weaponized DOJ that went after Adams for political reasons, and only after he criticized President Biden's immigration policies. This is a fellow Democrat. Do you think he should be prosecuted? And how do you respond to that allegation?
Well, first of all, the Attorney General did not cite any changes in the facts of the case. She did not cite any changes in the law because neither occurred, nor did she cite any irregularities in the investigation or the prosecution.
It's all made up.
Well, then she's mimicking her boss then, who just lies as a matter of course. One would expect more from the Attorney General of the United States. And, this whole corruption attack, that is an attack on the Department of Justice for engaging in corruption prosecutions, could be impeachable in a different political environment. But the fact that Mayor Adams is a Democrat is neither here nor there for me. I'm against corruption across the board. It seems like Donald Trump wants to attract all of the corrupt politicians in America to his side.
All of the things they complained about President Biden doing, which he didn't, they are immediately employing. Censorship, weaponization of government. Talk about corruption. Oh my gosh. It is, again, never surprised, always disgusted. But this is what it is now, I guess. I mean, like, these are their values or lack thereof. But we just have to be very clear about what's happening. Very direct. Clearly, Jamie Raskin is always doing that, so we're lucky to have him. But we need to get everyone else on board. We cannot treat this in any way, shape, or form. And we're having a pending, looming government shutdown ahead of us as a test case. But we can't treat this like a normal administration. We cannot treat this, and I don't like that we did in that first week. It wasn't us, and there's a lot of Democrats who didn't, but there were some who did. Like, this is business as usual, because it is not. And that is how we're going to approach this, and it's how we're going to cover things on the show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button. You can leave a like on this video, and if you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart. I can't even speak now. You can drop a blue heart in the comments. I don't know what a blue heart was. It's my southern accent coming out. We're losing it here, people. They're getting to me. We're doing our best. Some days are tougher than others, but the Vance thing is still on my mind. And clearly I'm crumbling here, but we're doing our best. And until next time, hopefully I'll be able to speak better next time. I'll see you soon.